So my reflections now, I am so happy I did it. I am so happy to be continuing the conversation. I feel now, definitely, actually, my friends are in better positions to absorb the information and think about their options as well. I think last year, 25 is an interesting time where you're either transitioning out of school or deciding on more training. I think I prompted 5 people to just think about fertility consultations and just learning more about themselves. I call it being a fertile fairy. I think that schools have told us that we are all fertile fairies and we can just snap our fingers and get pregnant when we want to, and you're gonna have sex once and get pregnant, and that's your story.
Mhm.
And I think that is so not true.
Mhm.
For many, for some it is, but we're talking about fertile fairies recently. I
Yes, I
love
like
that.
that term. I'm gonna I'm gonna have to steal it. I like
Yeah.
that term.
Based on your experiences, what do you want to tell people about egg freezing? What's your message that you're trying to share about egg freezing and fertility in general?
My main message is we are taught to be strategic and thoughtful about our careers. We should be just as strategic and thoughtful about our family planning. Full stop. And infertility shouldn't be stigmatized. Women experiencing untraditional family planning should not be stigmatized. And women who also want kids young should not be stigmatized. I think that we are on such individualized paths that we have the power as a collective group to change culture.
Hi, superhumans. I'm Dr. Mavis Garcia.
And I'm Dr. Wise.
We're two of the physician leaders at Markham Fertility Center, otherwise known as Our Baby, MFC.
As fertility specialists, we've witnessed firsthand the challenges, triumphs, and the myriad of emotions that come with trying to conceive. Whether you're just starting to think about having a baby, actively trying, or facing challenges along the way, My Fertility Podcast will be your go-to resource for honest conversations and a supportive community.
So grab a cup of coffee or tea and settle in, and let's demystify the world of fertility together. On today's episode, we welcome guest Shania Bhopa, who made the decision to freeze her eggs at age 25. We're going to discuss her reflections a whole year later and the reactions that she received from many voices on social media. You're going to be shocked at some of the comments that she got. At the end of the episode, we're going to finish it up with a round of rapid fire Q&A. Shania is the founder of NGO, the Canadian Courage Project, a PhD candidate and a wellness content creator. You can connect and follow Shania on all social media platforms at Well by Shania. We are so excited to have you here, Shania, talking about egg freezing today. Thank you so much for joining us. I know that you're super busy, almost finishing your PhD now and doing all the million projects that you're always doing. So we're honored that you found some time to talk to us today.
Thanks so much for having me.
You know what? I love this topic that we're getting into egg freezing because this is such an interesting thing. It's such a big change, actually, in the world of fertility in terms of egg freezing. And so, this taking this time to explore it is going to be really interesting. I'm really pumped.
I'm going to ask you some questions, and I know this is going to be a very insightful conversation. I know you and I go way back. So, why don't you tell us, how do we know each other? How did you decide to freeze your eggs at age 25?
Great question. So it was Christmas Day of 2022. My older sister and I were having dessert. We were eating ice cream. And for context, my older sister is a physician herself. And she mentioned, Shania, you have such big goals. You have things in your career you really want to accomplish. Have you ever thought about the timeline of having children? And how does that work with your goals? And that was the first time anyone's ever asked me that question, and the first time I've ever even thought about it critically. And so after that conversation over dessert, she had mentioned, if you want to have kids after the age of 35, think about the data, think about the statistics, think about the likelihood of potentially having to undergo IVF later on in life, and check your insurance and just do your own research. And that was pretty much the end of the conversation. And I did my own research and read a bunch of journals and articles and just really analyzed from like a researcher's perspective what egg freezing would be like, what is the success rate, what is the likelihood, what is the cost. And just based on the intersection of my personal goals and data is when I really thought about egg freezing as an option. So I looked at clinics in the area and tried to find clinics with the best reviews, ones that were women founded and focused, and the team was primarily women and had a high live birth rate. And I stumbled upon Dr. Garcia's door and had a consultation, learned a lot about myself, learned a lot about my options, and went ahead with egg freezing.
Excellent. And then you wanted to share that with the world, right? Which is amazing. There's a lot of patients that saw you and found you, and they came to me and you say, I saw this on Instagram, and because she has the same ethnicity as me, that's what gave me the idea to talk about it with your family and think about it. So I think that you've helped people that you'll never even met. And I mean, these are the ones that came to me, but I'm sure there were other ones, all over the world that went to their local fertility clinics. So I think it's great that you decided to share with the world. And from what I see, you had a lot of positive responses from people. There's some negative ones too. So do you want to talk about what that was like, sort of
Yeah.
putting your entire life online about this very personal journey and the responses that you got?
I would like to preface and give a shout out to my sister and my boyfriend. They are the ones who actually motivated me to post. I was originally going to keep this a secret because professionally, I was anxious. I was so stressed about my colleagues finding out that I was going through
Mm.
fertility treatments, which now, a year later, I'm like, why was I anxious about that? This should be discussed and this should be considered when you're planning your future goals. But a lot of my colleagues are older men. And I was very nervous that this would have seemed too inappropriate or unprofessional. And so my sister and my boyfriend motivated me. They're both physicians and they came from the angle of we never hear the patient's story. We
Mhm.
never see what it's like day to day, and that would make us better clinicians to understand the hardships and the emotional side of egg freezing. In terms of comments, there have been three main groups of comments. Group A, individuals who are really empowered and want to learn more. They are so curious and they might align very similarly to me in just being ambitious women. Group two are individuals who did not have a positive response based on social and cultural norms that they have confided in. And egg freezing, A, and women empowerment, B, is just not part of those norms. And so, quite a few, honestly, men, and I'm assuming their political views are slightly different than mine, but just really not encouraging to a woman, A, speaking up about her fertility openly, and B, being able to take control. I think that, and I know many people listening right now can probably relate to this, but you see the traditional timeline. You go to school, you get married, and you have children, and that's it. But there are so many intricate details that we don't share. We really don't share online. And a lot of men in the comments just think that I should be at home with kids at the age that I'm at now. And so I've gotten the question like, well, you're 25. Why don't you just have them now?
Mm.
Or, oh, you just don't want to settle down and
Mhm.
just want to date around forever.
Yeah, I've seen those comments. Yeah.
And I've also gotten a comment like, "No one wants you when you're 40."
Oh my
And
God.
yeah, no one will
That's
wanna date you when you're 50.
terrible. That's just mean.
I
Right? And
know.
that's completely random. And that's just mean and mean spirited.
Yeah. No
Yeah.
purpose behind the comment.
Mhm.
And I would say group number 3, and this is a reflection of our education system, so many people had no idea what egg freezing or what fertility treatments were. There
Mhm.
were lots of questions like, "Will I lose my period forever? Will all my eggs be gone? Will I have no more left? Does this mean you can have unprotected sex?" Questions that I found surprising, but now realizing the gaps in our education system, it's awful.
Mm.
Right.
Yeah,
Right.
for sure. I think, we can all attest to the fact that education in schools, especially around sex ed, around menstruation, for instance, and puberty, really focuses on sexually transmitted infections and don't get pregnant.
Mm.
And so then there is that definite lack for sure around teaching about fertility and what that can look like and what that can mean. especially for women like yourself who have ambitious career goals.
I'm curious, you have been already on social media for a while when you decided to make your egg freezing journey public. So were you surprised by what you call group two in your description? Were you surprised by those comments and those reactions?
After receiving the comments, I wasn't surprised, but I was shocked at the level of negativity and the level of quote
Mm,
unquote traditional thinking.
mhm,
I was so shocked that some of the comments from men, I responded like, I hope that you never speak to your wife or your children. Like the
mhm,
tonality and way that they framed women like we were in the 1900s again, archaic, was
mhm.
fascinating.
Yes, I have to say, I went down the rabbit hole of your comments on your post. And I was like and your sister sent me a message, she's like, "You gotta see these comments," you know? And wow, yeah, I was shocked that in today's age, people think it's okay to talk to women like that in public. People think it's okay to tell women that they should just be home having children and not taking care of themselves. I was like, "This 100 years ago." I couldn't believe it.
Yeah. I tried to go down the rabbit hole of your comments, but I just ended up so angry. I just like slammed my phone shut. I was like, I can't deal with this. So how did you deal with it?
Honestly, the comments didn't personally affect
Mm,
me. I see my online presence as a persona, and then I
mhm.
see the people talking to that version of me, not me. It's a weird
Interesting. Hmm.
yeah, I kinda dissociate from my online version of myself.
Yeah.
I think it motivated me weirdly a little bit
Mhm,
more to talk about this even more. Like, I
mhm,
was like, "You know what? If you're gonna be angry and you're gonna hate that I'm empowering women, that's exactly what I'm gonna do then."
mhm.
Because there have been women in those men's lives that have been suppressed from speaking up, and that's not okay. So I'm just trying to speak for all women out there who may not ever comment saying thank you, but are appreciative of the work that even both of you are doing and every woman out there speaking up is doing today.
That's
That's
really
amazing.
incredible.
That's
You
great.
know, you're it's such a fantastic thing that you did in terms of bringing this to the forefront and talking about it in a way that was accessible and in a way that made it seem approachable because that's really what people want to know or to hear about. And so prior to you doing this, there may not have been a ton on social media about egg freezing. Looking back on your own journey, what were those things that surprised you? What were the easiest things and what were the most challenging?
I would say one surprising thing that I didn't find surprising, but everyone else did around me and my family was I didn't find it emotionally draining or I wasn't really emotionally attached to the experience. And I think I'm lucky because I'm young and
Mhm.
I'm not in a committed relationship and I'm not doing this as a reactive procedure versus proactive.
That's right.
So I saw it just as a logical like data point in my journey. Challenging. I don't think anyone talks about this enough, but scheduling. It
Yes.
sounds so random, but if you have a busy schedule, if you're someone who is working full time while doing this procedure, really considering that there's appointments in the morning and every night taking those shots, like my trigger shot, I had to take in a bathroom at Maple Leaf game
Yeah.
at the ACC. And so just the little things like the coordination was a bit of a barrier. And I would also say having support around you is so important. And I try to really evoke that in my content online that even if it's just someone who can help ice your stomach before you take your injections or just, hanging out with the day of your retrieval, those little things really do matter.
Well, I'm gonna say what was the hardest part of your journey for me as your doctor. I mean, I do this all the time, obviously, do lots of egg freezing. You had a really good prognosis and you're young, and I knew that you would do well medically. I was never worried, but you were posting every day what was going on. And it was, I don't know how to explain it. It was weird to see my patient on social media and now that happens all the time. Lots of my patients on social media, I love it. I follow them, I see them, and I learn, even though they're my patient and I know exactly what's going on medically. Sometimes they share things on social media that I wouldn't have known otherwise. And it's very interesting for me as a physician. So I learned also seeing you go through it on social media, even though I saw you in person all the time, seeing people react to your experience on social media as well. And then, of course, the date of the retrieval, it was Dr. Weiss. I was there filming and I was doing the procedure. And
Oh, Dr. Weiss, you
yeah,
saw me when I
sh-
was out.
she was the one.
Yeah,
Yeah,
no,
she came
I was the one
early.
running around with, I think, your phone and Dr.
Yes.
Garcia's phone to get the photos for the social media and like running into the lab, take the photos of the eggs and everything. Yeah, that was me.
Thanks for being there.
Oh my goodness, my pleasure. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, obviously not everyone necessarily has to fully photograph and document their egg freezing journey. If somebody opts to keep it private, that's completely within their own purview. But at the same time, it was so wonderful to be able to put that message out there, put that content out there to sort of say, look, this is normal and it's okay and it's going to be fine and it doesn't have to be this big bad scary thing, or it doesn't have to signal that you're getting old, or it doesn't have to be some like ominous thing that a lot of people kind of
Mhm.
worry about. Only quote unquote old women do this, or that quote unquote only the women who are still single do this
Yeah,
out of
yeah.
desperation or something, which is absolutely categorically not true, right?
Out
But
of curiosity, how did both of you feel being on the other side and working with different cases throughout your weeks? And what's the most difficult part for you?
I think all of it, you're absolutely right. And you said something really interesting. You said it wasn't emotional, I wasn't attached. And that is the complete opposite experience of most of our patients because you're not a fertility patient. You're not doing this because you're getting cancer treatment tomorrow. You're not doing this because all of a sudden you find out you're 40 and you're doing it in a non reactive way, in an empowering way with lots of time. You could have doing this year, you could do it next year, you could do the year after. So I think for most of our patients, that is not the case. It's difficult for us as physicians, and especially we have to adjust. It's always about the patient, it's never about us, right? So we have to adjust our reactions, our feelings, our interactions to the patient experience. So if I'm with you and I know that you want to film, that you're excited, that this is empowering, that's what I need to share with you.
Mhm.
But if I am with the patient next door who is having cancer treatment the next day, and this is the last shot, and she's got three eggs growing, and I have to have that conversation with her, then I have to switch. Like I have to completely change my mindset and be almost like you're saying, compartmentalizing and be a different person. So I could be happy, social media, excited for you, empowering for you, and be present for patients in a completely different circumstance. So I've been doing this for many years, but I know when I first started my journey as a physician, that was one of the things that I struggled with the most. In obstetrics, I would deliver a baby, so happy, and then I go next door and deal with an ectopic or deal with stillbirth. And when I first started my journey as a physician, I used to think, am I fake? Am I two-faced person because I go from one room to another feeling different things and being different? But then I realized that's just part of individualized care and being there present for the patient in the moment in whatever they are experiencing. I don't know about you, Dr. Weiss. What would you say to that?
One of the most interesting things is the advent of egg freezing and sort of the fact that it has become much more popular over the last, what I'd say maybe like 5 years. I mean, it's been around for a long time, this concept of freezing your eggs for your own purposes for the future, this quote unquote like social egg freezing. But it really has taken off in the last few years, and I absolutely love it. And I get so excited when I see patients who are coming and doing this from a position of empowerment or thinking about their futures because number one, it tells me that people are now learning about their fertility and are thinking about their fertility. And it also tells me that people are now starting to reconcile this concept of potentially having the career, being in school for a bajillion years, and to build a family, and that those two things can come together in a way, but you have to be smart. You kind of have to plan it in some way. I think that's absolutely fantastic. And the fact that it's really growing in popularity is an incredible thing. And I'm actually really excited to see what's going to happen 10, 15, 20 years down the road when more women have frozen their eggs. And then they're seeing myself, Dr. Garcia, as fertility doctors, and they're like, well, we've got frozen eggs from before. And I think that's going to really change, really shape the conversations that we have because that's what makes fertility as a subspecialty so interesting, right? Because it is such a rapidly changing, such a dynamic field, and that it does have that breadth of emotions. I actually really enjoy the contrasts in terms of seeing a patient for egg freezing. And we're like, yeah, you're going to freeze your eggs. Like, this is going to be great. We're going to give you that opportunity so that you can stay in school and you can achieve everything you want to achieve, which I mean, I love that, obviously, because it speaks very deeply to my soul. But then to be able to see the patients with the infertility and to be able to be there with them in their most difficult and most challenging moments. And it's that breadth of emotions that I actually really enjoy.
The range.
Yeah.
It is a skill
Range.
set.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So I just love that we're able to see patients for so many different reasons in so many different ways. And that we're able to do this because, school is school. You can't get around it. You just have to go through those years. But then to be able to still be able to build the families that people want, it's a beautiful thing.
So I'm curious, it's now been a year since that famous decision and that famous conversation that we had together. What is it like now a year later? Do you feel differently? Do you feel the same?
So, interestingly, I didn't think about it until the, 7-month mark, and someone had asked me in a comment, they were a new follower, and they were like, "I didn't know you froze your eggs. Give me a recap." They're like, "You know what? I'll do a 6-month reflection." And that went even more viral than the first round of all of this. So we went back around, and we just shared all the reflections, and I feel like I'm doing more press now than I did last year.
Mhm.
I was on the Today Show in New York,
Yes,
and
I saw that.
that was
Congratulations.
insane. So my reflections now, I am so happy I did it. I am so happy to be continuing the conversation. I feel now, definitely, actually, my friends are in better positions to absorb the information and think about their options as well. I think last year, 25 is an interesting time where you're either transitioning out of school or deciding on more training. And so a lot of my friends were like, "I can't think about that right now." But a lot of them right now, a year later, are creating work back plans of, after residency, for example, are they going to have kids during residency? And having those conversations, which has been so exciting because I can actually share options and just share ideas. I think I've prompted 5 people to just think about fertility consultations and just learning more about themselves. I call it being a fertile fairy. I think that schools have told us that we are all fertile fairies and we can just snap our fingers and get pregnant when we want to. And you're going to have sex once and get pregnant, and that's your story.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that is so not true.
Mm-hmm.
Mhm.
For many, for some it is, but we're talking about fertile fairies recently. I
Yes, I
love
like
that.
that term. I'm gonna I'm gonna have to steal it. I like
Yeah,
that term.
That's a good one. Based on all of this, based on all your experiences, what do you want to tell people about egg freezing? What's your message that you're trying to share about egg freezing and fertility in general?
My main message is we are taught to be strategic and thoughtful about our careers. We should be just as strategic and thoughtful about our family planning. Full stop. I think that women are often shamed for being strategic about their careers and their family planning because it's seen as masculine energy.
Mhm.
And if you're listening, I'm doing quotations around the masculine energy. It's like a trend now on social media. And so it's not. It's just being thoughtful. And if you really want future you to achieve goals such as motherhood, be as thoughtful as you can be and utilize the resources available to you. And so egg freezing, for example, is an option. It's not the only option. I would say talk to your doctor openly, talk to a fertility specialist, book a consultation, understand your body because this is going to be your experience and it's so individualized to you. And finally, openly talk about family planning at your dinner table. I think that we all have so much power in our communities, in our friend circles, in our families to break down the walls that currently exist for women and couples. And infertility shouldn't be stigmatized. Women experiencing untraditional family planning should not be stigmatized. And women who also want kids young should not be stigmatized. I think that we are on such individualized paths that we have the power as a collective group to change culture.
Absolutely. A lot of my patients tell me no one ever talks to them about family planning. And then they get married. And the moment they get married, it's like, okay, when are you having kids? Why aren't you pregnant yet? And it goes from like 0 to 100 in the span of a couple of months. You're absolutely right. This is something that women should be thinking about ahead of time, regardless whether they have a partner or not, whether they want to go to school for a gazillion years or not. It's just thinking, okay, where I am today, where do I want to be? How am I going to get there? What are the resources available to me? And you're right. Seeing a fertility specialist doesn't mean you're freezing your eggs tomorrow. It's about finding out what your ovarian reserve is, your AMH level, your antifollicle count. What does it mean? And having an understanding of what that is all about, so that the worst thing that I hear, and Dr. Weiss could attest to this, is somebody sitting there saying, I wish I would have known. I wish I would have known. I wish I had done this sooner. I wish I didn't listen to that person. I wish I didn't spend all that time with this one partner and then we're not together and I'm 40 or 39. We see that all the time and it's
Yeah,
heartbreaking.
it
It's
is.
heartbreaking because as
Yeah.
great as technology is today, and it's amazing that we can freeze eggs, that wasn't even available when I started in this career. It's something that's become available during my time as a fertility specialist. But as amazing as that is, we still don't know how to turn back the clock on the ovaries or the eggs. So we can freeze them in time. We can't make them younger once they're older. So that technology does not exist. I don't know if it ever will exist. I'm sure it will exist eventually, but maybe not in our lifetime. So, yeah, I think the best that we have right now is the ability to freeze your eggs or even just the ability to have a conversation. And then you can decide, you know what? I don't want to freeze my eggs. I want to just live my life and see what happens. Or I want to not have that career or have children during my training, during residency, or during my PhD. And that's perfectly valid options as well.
Absolutely. Just to echo what Dr. Garcia said, I see a lot of patients who really didn't know, that they just kind of assumed that
They
they
were
would get
fertile
pregnant.
ferrets.
Yeah, that
That's
they are a
right.
fertile fairy and, they are, let's say, in their early, even mid-40s. And so it's a really challenging conversation to say, listen, simply with age, your chances of getting pregnant, your chances of miscarriage, unfortunately, they're not great, right? Your chances of pregnancy are going to be much lower. Your chances of miscarriage are going to be higher. And that even things like IVF can't, quote unquote, save you, in the sense that age is still the biggest predictor for success in an IVF cycle, regardless of all the technologies that we have. And it can be a really challenging conversation. Sometimes people are absolutely gobsmacked that they just kind of assumed that they can come when they're mid 40s and we'll just do the thing and it will
The
just work.
magic.
I'm like, well, unfortunately, it doesn't quite work that way. And that can take several appointments even to be able to really work through that conversation, to actually get people to truly understand that. And it's tough. I've had lots of patients say, number one, I wish I had known about this earlier. And number two, now there's a lot of patients saying, I wish I had frozen my eggs. And I say, what's done is done. The past is the past. We can't go back in time. Egg freezing and how society views it now and how common it is wildly different, even from what it was, 5, 10 years ago. And so there's no point beating yourself up over that. But I say, but educate people. Tell your friends, tell the children of friends, tell people, tell other women, right? And I think that not even just social media, but I think that from a very kind of grassroots perspective, that female to female communication, right? As a female, talking to your female friends about the things that you've learned. It's actually how I've learned a lot of the greatest things. Every time I talk to Garcia, I think I learned something. She tells me something inspirational. But it is that female to female communication,
Mhm.
whether it's a friend talking to a friend or whether it's on social media, where that's how a lot of information gets transmitted. And so I say, listen, like, talking about it is absolutely key. And that is the absolute place, I think, to start for sure.
Okay. Can we do a quick rapid fire round of myth busting for all the women listening right now that are interested in egg freezing but have some questions and they're curious?
Yeah,
Yeah,
let's go for
absolutely.
it.
Okay, question number one. Will you have no eggs left? What is it like? How many eggs is a woman born with, and how many do you remove?
So after an egg freezing cycle, you're going to have the same number of eggs that you had before you went through an egg freezing cycle. So freezing your eggs does not mean that we are taking away your eggs. What it means is that we're taking away the eggs that you had selected for that particular menstrual cycle. So the way that it works is women are born with the number of eggs they're ever going to have, and it's millions of eggs. And every month there is a group of eggs that get selected by the ovary to develop the receptors. And from that group of eggs, only one is the one who's going to ovulate and potentially turn into a baby, and all the other ones are going to die. And that's just the normal mechanism of the physiology of the ovaries. Now, when we're doing egg freezing, what we're doing is we are rescuing all those eggs that were destined for death we're rescuing them from that by giving the hormones that the body normally produces. We give you a higher level dose of those hormones so that all of those follicles, all of those eggs actually come out to be released and we can take them out of the body and freeze them. So it has no impact on how early you're going to go through menopause. You're going to go through menopause at the same age that you would have before you did an egg freezing cycle. And that applies for anybody who's doing IVF, regardless of the number of IVF cycles that you do.
And would you lose your period forever?
Interesting questions. No, you will definitely not lose your period if you freeze your eggs. When you freeze your eggs, we are using the eggs that have already started growing in that particular cycle in that particular month. From the time that you stop the medications, the hormone levels will drop very rapidly within the space of like a week. And then most people will have a period at that point, and their hormone levels will be completely back to baseline and they will continue cycling just as they have previously. Really, the expectation is that the periods will come back in the way that they were prior to the egg freezing cycle. They will be the same. They're not going to change heavy, light, short, long, whatever. The cycles will just go back to regular after that first cycle after retrieval.
Is the success rate really low?
It depends on the age that you are at the time that you freeze your eggs. The younger you are, the higher the success rates. And the older you are, the lower the success rates. So for somebody who is 25 years of age when they freeze their eggs, success rates are very good, 60, 65% pregnancy rate for a group of eggs. It's not per egg. So like about 10 eggs at 25 years of age would give you that kind of success rate. If somebody's older, the success rate is lower. Therefore, you need more eggs when you're older. So for example, a 25-year-old may have a 60% pregnancy rate with, let's say, 15 eggs versus 40-year-old may need 40 eggs or 30 eggs to have that kind of pregnancy rate. So the success rates are very good, but it depends on age.
And does your age impact the abnormalities?
Whether we're talking about egg freezing or IVF or even spontaneous pregnancies, every woman, every person with ovaries is going to be born with all the eggs they're ever going to have in their lifetime. So every egg that is sitting in the ovary has been there for your full lifespan. If somebody's 25, then those eggs have been in the ovary for 25 years. And over that 25 years, they can accumulate little bits of genetic damage. And this is totally normal. The analogy I often use, it's like skin, right? So you see a newborn baby, they're born with perfect blemish-free skin, right? And then as we age, we get dark spots, red spots, wrinkles, scars, etc. And you can kind of judge how old somebody is by the appearance of their skin. Eggs are kind of similar in that sense. So as time goes on, the proportion of genetically normal to genetically abnormal eggs will change. And this is the big reason, this is the crux of why it's harder to get pregnant as you get older. Because in somebody who has a regular menstrual cycle, 28 days, let's say, you are ovulating one egg per month. So the likelihood of that egg being genetically normal, meaning that it can yield a healthy pregnancy, drops as women get older. And that's why it's harder to get pregnant with age. So when you freeze eggs at a younger age, they're not going to continue to go through that genetic damage process. And so the chance of miscarriage, the chance of chromosomal abnormality, something like Down syndrome, will be that of the age of the eggs, not necessarily the age of the woman when she's actually pursuing pregnancy, let's say. And so that's why egg freezing, it can be such a powerful tool as well.
Amazing. And is there anything that women can do to improve the quality of their eggs?
I get asked this question all the time, and I always say yes and no. The no part is that there isn't something super dramatic. And the analogy that I give is if you have pneumonia, there's something called antibiotics. Penicillins are so effective. You take it 7 days later, you're usually better. And that, I would say, that's very dramatic improvement in infection rate when you use antibiotics. There isn't a drug that powerful for egg quality. Having said that, that doesn't mean that there aren't things that you can do to improve egg quality. There are. So lifestyle factors like good sleep, good nutrition, exercise, all of the things that we talk about in terms of general health that can have a good impact on your eggs as well. There's some supplements as well that, again, they're not magic bullets in the same way that antibiotics really are magic bullet for some infections. But there are some supplements like folic acid or coenzyme Q10, omega-3s that have been shown to have a positive impact on egg quality.
And is there anything women can do in terms of, are there long-term side effects from the egg freezing process that they might be impacted by?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think that's a question that comes up a lot in terms of egg freezing and IVF as well. Because again, the process it can be quite similar in terms of taking the medications and then going through that egg retrieval process. Really, especially with egg freezing, there are no known long-term implications, no long-term concerns in terms of eggs' future fertility, let's say for a spontaneous pregnancy, health considerations, absolutely nothing. And I always tell people, like, you're on these medications for a really short period of time, right? So it might be anywhere from 10 to 12 days of those medications. And although the hormone levels are high, and that people always get a little bit anxious when hormone levels are high or they're abnormal, it's a very short period of time in comparison to your whole life. Number one. And number two, these are hormones that are naturally very high throughout pregnancy. And so that's why we aren't so concerned about these high levels of hormones and their longer term effects. Going through this is very safe with no known long term implications.
And how much should I care about the quality of my partner's sperm in relation to the quality of my egg and potentially when the time comes and I'm making an embryo?
Great question. And I think you should care very much about the quality of your partner's sperm. And I wish males care more about the quality of their own sperm because I know that it gets downplayed. Of course, the women's eggs are precious. We cannot see eggs the way that we can see sperm. Person masturbates, we look at the sample, and I can talk about sperm. You have this count, you have this motility. I can't say that about an egg unless I'm doing the retrieval and you're already going there. So, because of all of those things, we put so much emphasis on the female partner going through fertility. Sperm is cheap. You can get sperm very easily, 3 times a day for that matter. Good luck trying to get eggs out of your body. So, for that reason, I know it has been downplayed, but it's extremely important. It's half the equation. And I think that there are many things that men can do to improve their sperm, similar to for women, good sleep habits, good nutrition, hydration, exercise is really important, maintaining a healthy body habit. Of course, smoking, drugs, alcohol, those things can have a very negative impact on both egg and sperm. And again, there are some supplements as well that men can take, but I think supplements are only needed if there's really a problem. But any couple who is trying to conceive, it should be a conversation, like you're saying, at the dinner table with both partners coming together, saying, this is what we can do together to make sure that the quality of our gametes, eggs, and the sperms are the best.
Amazing. And my final question, not necessarily rapid fire, but I think for listeners, they might be interested in the full timeline. Now I have eggs in the freezer. What happens next? And what does that timeline look like?
That timeline really depends on the person, right? And what I mean by that is that there are so many different paths or permutations of what can happen in the future, right? Let's say there's a situation where you have somebody who froze their eggs, a few years have passed, and now they're in a situation where they may want to have a child, let's say by themselves, right? So then again, we would see them. And then we talk about sperm. We can talk about sperm donors, sperm banks, sort that process out. And they can move into making embryos in a fairly short amount of time if that's the road they want to take. I always talk to my patients about, well, okay, you've got frozen eggs, but what about just trying inseminations, for instance, with donor sperm? Because maybe you want to have more than one child and you want to keep those eggs for baby number 2 or baby number 3, let's say down the road. Trying to navigate what the potential plan hope streams are for that patient in that moment. So it could be 2 months or 3 months that you might be moving into something. For, let's say, somebody where someone has frozen their eggs and they have a partner who has sperm, I would still always start with that general fertility workup, right? Let's see what's going on and definitely do a semen analysis for sure and check on that sperm. And in a situation where a couple's been trying for a while, they've not had a successful pregnancy, starting with a general kind of fertility workup, and then talking about, okay, what is the bigger family plan? Are you hoping to have one child? Are you hoping to have multiple children? What are the eggs like now? Should we move into inseminations, let's say, doing something like IUI, or do we move into thawing the eggs, making embryos, and going down that pathway? And so we're talking about all the different possibilities and what things could look like. But again, these things can move quite fast. I mean, I always tell people, like, when you've frozen your eggs and then you're thinking about egg thawing, The getting to the freezing of the eggs is the hard part. That is like 90% of the work in terms of the cycle monitoring appointments, the injections, going through procedures. Thawing the eggs, I mean, that's the lab's job, right? Partner produces a sperm sample or we have frozen sperm. We're making the embryos. That's happening in the lab. So you've already put in all that hard work. And so when you actually go back to thaw the eggs, you're almost coming to reap the benefits. You've done all the hard work already, right? I always try and emphasize that. That's the harder part is done. And this is going to be a little bit of the easier part.
Yeah. But I think it's important to know that just because somebody froze their eggs doesn't mean that is the way they're going to have a child. Like we would normally recommend, okay, so if you froze your egg at 25 and you're getting married at 32 or 35 or 36, okay, great. You've got a partner, married or not. Then if you want to be pregnant, you try naturally. You might not even need to come back for your eggs at all. That would be the best outcome. Even though you froze your eggs for Shania, you still want to be talking about family planning. There's still a conversation that's happening because this is ongoing, right? We do advise them to still try to conceive sort of in the late 30s range. And if pregnancy doesn't happen at that point, if you're faced with infertility, then it's just at the time when you come to fertility specialist and Dr. White say we would start from the beginning. We're not going to automatically be like, okay, great, you froze your eggs, you're 33, let's thaw them out and make a baby. We're still going to work through all of those options. And ideally, those eggs want to be your last resort because that was the whole point, giving you an option at a time when you wouldn't have had that option. So if somebody is 42 or 43 and they have done 5 IVS, 6 IVS, they have decreased ovarian reserve, we're not making embryos, the next option is an egg donor. But if they have frozen their eggs, they have one more option available to them that they wouldn't have had otherwise. So the idea is that it's one of the many options you might have available in the future. It's not the only option that you're going to have available in the future.
Great. I'm excited to come back. Well, hopefully I don't come back one day for a thaw, but
That's what I
You can
always say to
still,
my egg freezing
yeah,
patients. I'm like, it was
right.
lovely to meet you. I had a wonderful time going through this journey with you, but I hope you don't have to see me again.
That's right. It's like insurance. You have it, but you never want to use it. You never want to be calling your insurance agent saying, I need you now.
Yeah.
And for both of you as women in the field, if you were to give your 25-year-old self one piece of advice related to family planning and career, what would it be?
If I were to go back and talk to my 25-year-old self, I would tell her, thank you for working so hard. Because when I was 25, I was super ambitious. I was driven. I was determined. There was no turning me back. I had come to Canada when I was 20. So at 25, I was still learning the language. I was trying to get into medical school. It was very competitive. I wasn't born here, so I felt I was a low socioeconomic status being a new immigrant. And I was so determined, which came at a price because I didn't have a lot of friends. I didn't have fun. I was studying work. And I was very, in a way, sad at the time because I knew I wasn't having fun and I knew I was just grinding. And it paid off. And I now have the life of my dream, both personally and professionally. So I would go back and say, thank you for grinding. Thank you for not giving up. Thank you for being sad and making the sacrifices because now we are rocking it, girl.
Oh, that's so beautiful. And Dr. Weiss?
If I were to go back and talk to my 25-year-old self, I would really say there is so much delayed gratification that goes into long schooling. So again, whether that's somebody who went to professional school, PhD, etc. And the delayed gratification is really exhausting and is so tiresome sometimes. Not to sound like a broken record, but I agree with Dr. Garcia in the sense that, I just said, keep going, just one more day. Just keep going, just one more day. And every day will get a little bit better and you will start to see over that precipice, right? And you will get there. And if you just keep grinding away, just chipping away, like you absolutely can get there. And then what I would have told my younger self about infertility would have been, you don't have to decide now, right? Certainly when I was 25, all I wanted to do was to be a doctor. I really had no other intentions. When I was a child, I dreamed of being a doctor. Other children dreamed about their wedding. Like when it came to wedding planning, they were like, oh, what did you dream of when you were a little girl? I was like, I didn't. There was a white coat. There was no white dress. And so to my 25-year-old self, I would have said, listen, there are still so many options. You still have time. You don't need to make these big decisions now, but give yourself the tools to figure out what you can do. And to be honest, I kind of always wondered, maybe I probably should have frozen my eggs actually at 25 or 30. And I didn't because it wasn't really that popular even when I was around. That's something that I always kind of wonder about. I wish I would have done it, but I definitely would counsel. I have 3 nieces. I'm going to be all over that when they're 25, 30 years of age, bugging them about it, right? Just from a female perspective in terms of what they want to do. I think, yeah, at that point, you don't need to make those big decisions, but you can decide what to do that can open up different avenues for you, and that there is still time, and that the worst thing that you can do is to be with someone just because you feel like you need to be with someone, right? Or that you need to stay with someone because you need to have kids because of your biological clock. That is the absolute worst thing that you can do.
That's the conversation. If you're 25 to 30 or even 25 to 35 and you are either with a partner or you're not with a partner, that topic is brought up at every dinner party right now with your girlfriends, right? He's great. Is he someone I want to be the dad to my future kids?
Mhm.
Is he someone who is going to be the husband to me? Like, you kind of feel anxious.
I remember having that anxiety, but going back, I would say it's worth the wait. Like, I have an amazing husband, and I had to wait for him. And I was dating somebody else when I was 25 who I knew it just wasn't right. He was a very good guy, but just I knew it wasn't right. And I'm so glad that I was true to myself. I could have said, oh, it's good enough. And what if I don't meet somebody else? But I'm so glad that I was brave to say, this is not what I want. I deserve more. And I think good men are worth the wait. And not for the men, for you. It's not about him, it's about me. Every woman deserves to be loved and be cherished and be in a relationship where they feel like they're a true partner.
Mhm.
And those things are worth waiting for. And if you don't find it, then you get to be that to yourself.
Yeah.
But it's much better than giving your life and your fertility to somebody who is
Mhm.
not quite right.
I think, especially for women who are successful or pursuing lots of education, whatever, the one thing that I wish I had like practically tattooed on my forehead was never ever dim your own shine for somebody else. Never ever do that. You should never ever have to do that, right? You have done all these incredible things, done all this schooling, made all these incredible achievements. You should never be in a position to feel like you have to kind of downplay that so that somebody else doesn't feel insecure. And as soon as you feel that, red flag.
There's this quote that says, women often put people's comfortability over their own personality. And that's aside from being in partnerships, but also just in circles and circumstances. You put people's comfortability above your own personality sometimes.
I think it's particularly difficult in a romantic relationship because you're just with them all the time. And when my husband and I go for walks, we always say the one thing we want for our children more than anything is to find the right partner because that really is the key to everything else in a way, you know? Absolutely. I would agree with Dr. Wise. I think it happens way too much in romantic relationships and in many circles that women, especially successful women, are trying to be less off just to make other people more comfortable.
I think that this really wraps up with egg freezing. So I did a big presentation on egg freezing. This was a few years ago. And there was this one quote at the end of this one paper that I read that I thought was just so fantastic. And I just wanted to share with you and get your reflection on it. Okay, so for women who do want genetically related children and who wish to avoid the difficulties associated with infertility, the pressure to use egg freezing unduly places reproductive responsibilities on individual women and obscures the influence of social structures that can contribute to delayed childbearing in the first place. For example, in the absence of funded childcare programs that can make childbearing and child rearing at a younger age more likely and easier, the decision to delay childbearing may not be a choice at all. That was from Petro Panagos et al. In 2015. I love that quote. It really makes me stop and think that although I'm so glad that we have the ability to freeze eggs and that we're talking about egg freezing, that we also need to look at society as a whole, society's bigger picture, and figure out, wait a second, why are we delaying childbearing? Why are we pushing childbearing to the side? And how are we going to support people who want to be able to have kids as well? But just wanted to get your reflections on that.
That's an excellent quote. I really liked it. I'd love to read the paper as well.
Yeah,
And
I'll send it to you.
yeah. So I wrote a chapter in a textbook The textbook was on EDI in medicine. And the chapter was about how women often have to, for example, take off your wedding ring before a job interview. Because if you are interviewed by men and they could foresee you having children and having to take time off work, they won't hire you. And so it's related to the social context in which we all live, that we don't have a system that supports women who want to take time off work to have children. Because we see that women will come back, they'll be a few years behind, they won't get hired again, they won't be at their peak performance capabilities. And I think that's so unfortunate. And there's a lot of work to do. I will also say, in the context of the current economic crisis we're in right now socially, egg freezing aside, just fertility education and opportunities for women to have free birth control should be a topic that we're all talking about at the dinner table as well. Because unfortunately, if you think that you're a fertile fairy, you're either anxious about pregnancy, you don't even want to think about it, talk about it, or if you are unclear about pregnancy and getting pregnant naturally, there can be circumstances where you did not know that birth control should have been an option or was an option available. So that's also a can of worms that we need to end off with. Or, if you're listening to this is like a reflection point for you at your next dinner party.
Yeah. I think it's all about options, because even if there was available childcare and societal structures to allow women to have children earlier, some women just don't want to. I mean, with all the childcare in the world, having children is still a huge responsibility, regardless of how much society may support. And I agree that there needs to be a lot more support. So I think at the end of the day, it's all about choice, right? If you want to have children early in your career, here are all the resources that you should have available to you. There is a childcare, there is a societal structure, your career is not going to be damaged. If you want to freeze your eggs, see all the resources. If you want to be on birth control forever until you're menopausal, here are the resources to do that. And it's about choices. Every woman is her own universe, it's unique, and our circumstances are so different. And God damn it, it's not the 1950s anymore. For all those men on Shania's thread, check your calendars. It's the year 2024, for God's sake. Women have choices. Some of them want to stay home and have children on 25. That's wonderful. They can do that. Some of us don't. And we should be able to make those choices as well. Thank you so much for coming to our podcast. I know that you're super busy accomplishing all of your amazing goals, and we're so privileged that you had some time for us today. What a wonderful, insightful conversation. And thank you so much for breaking the stigma and going on social media and sharing your journey, even though it made me really anxious as your doctor. But I'm glad that you did it. I'm glad that we both did it.
And thank you for having me. And thank you for being part of my journey.
You are very welcome.
It was an absolute pleasure having you on the podcast. And I'm so glad that we have talked about so many different topics, and because I think egg freezing is so wrapped up in societal pressures and discussions about women and equality and equity and all these other things, and it's fantastic. I really hope that this is just a starting point for the bigger conversation, right? And then I hope that we can all continue it on social media and otherwise and keep the conversation going, because by talking about it, we're publicizing it, we're encouraging other people to talk about it, friends talking to friends, people talking about things at the dinner table, and I think that's really powerful. And that's a wrap for today, Superhumans.
If you're looking to connect, get social with us. Follow us on YouTube and Instagram at My Fertility Podcast, or visit us online at myconfertility.com. And don't forget, follow, subscribe, and share your favorite episodes.
Thanks for listening to My Fertility Podcast and for being a vital part of our community. We know you've got this.
We're signing off until next Tuesday.
If you found this episode of My Fertility Podcast helpful, please take a moment to head over to the review section and leave us your thoughts. Your reviews and comments are incredibly valuable to us and help guide future episodes. We also welcome you to direct your questions to info@myfertilitypodcast.com.
My Fertility Podcast is produced by Rabbit Media Inc. in conjunction with Dr. Garcia and Dr. Weiss. Music from Mix Kit Raising Me Higher by Ajay Stelino. My Fertility Podcast is not intended to replace any type or variation thereof professional medical, health, or legal advice, nor should the content be taken as medical advice. Please contact your primary healthcare professional regarding any medical questions you may have. The information presented in this podcast is based on the knowledge and understanding of the host at the time of recording. Medical knowledge is constantly evolving, and new research may change the understanding of health-related topics. While we strive to provide accurate and up-to-date information, we do not guarantee the completeness, accuracy, or timeliness of the content. The views expressed in this podcast by guests are not those of the host or the management. This podcast is not intended to impose any type of discrimination. My Fertility Podcast and its management are not responsible for any losses, damages, or liabilities that may arise from the use of this podcast.